Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Unmuted Love. It's me, your host, C. Eshelman, and today we're going to tackle part 3 of parenting children diagnosed and those undiagnosed with reactive attachment disorder. I hope you enjoy this deep dive into one of the most controversial diagnoses of our time. So let's go. Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's part 2 of Reactive Attachment Challenge Children, and I decided to rename it. It's Reactive Attachment Challenge Children Need Love the Most. And I truly believe that. You know, the kids who are the hardest to love are the ones who need it the most. Reactive attachment challenge children, whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed, they are hungry for love, but they don't act like it often. And so our job is to stay loving in the face of behavior that seems unlovable. Part 1 was really looking at what is reactive attachment disorder, what is, well, let's just call it disinhibited instead of all the words that go with it. Disinhibited social engagement disorder. It's a big mouthful. That's just the flip side of the same reactive attachment coin. You might have that diagnosed in one of your children that you're living with or some children that you're working with. But the truth is, I really like to look at it more like complex developmental trauma rather than as a diagnosed or undiagnosed reactive attachment disorder. If we look at it like complex developmental trauma, we can look at it more like a spectrum rather than a label. Like autism is a spectrum, so I think is complex developmental trauma. There are some children who are extremely attachment challenged and some who are a little less so. And so what you'll get is a spectrum of behavior that you're looking at that all comes under the heading of complex developmental trauma. Okay, there was a little more to it than that, but we'll just pick up from there. Part 1 was about looking at what it is, and part 2 is about how to parent it. There will be a difference in you, the people who have actually parented that, and the people who have maybe worked with or walked beside somebody parenting it, than the folks who are parenting other attachment challenged kids with complex developmental trauma, but on the short side of the spectrum, where they maybe had less significant follow-up traumas. So everybody's attachment trauma is a trauma, but then the complexity of it is how much and what level of trauma you experienced post the attachment breach that you originally suffered. If you're parenting a child right now diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, you may be experiencing a very high level of disturbing behaviors, especially if they're teenagers. And I just want to say to you, I get that. I understand reactive attachment disorder diagnosed teenagers, and I know that their brains are on fire. And that means you're living with kids who feel like their brains are on fire, right? Their behavior might be very extreme and impulsive and somewhat unbelievable. What I want you to know about that is that this is a point in time, and our job as caregivers is to help them stay alive, right? To get to the place where they are more mature. They are extremely dismature in the teen years. Well, they're dismature all their years, but when in the teen years, it shows up pretty significantly, like a 16-year-old who's expecting to drive, who has emotional dysregulation that looks a lot like a 2-year-old or an 8-year-old at various times, or whose cause and effect thinking seems more like an 8 or 10-year-old. You really don't want to put behind a wheel, for example, but they are just dying to be able to drive. And then what do? So you might be dealing with all kinds of things around development that seem like, well, they're 16, they should be able to X and they should be able to Y. And so I'm trying to give that to them, but then they're kind of going off the edge. That's what you're living with. And I know that. And the truth is you really can't give them the age-appropriate kinds of privileges that you can give some other children who are more neurotypical and who are less dismature, because they actually aren't mature enough to handle that level of responsibility. And so you have to hold back on it. And that's really hard because it causes all kinds of disruption in your household when you have to say no to these things. And I understand that. And the big task for you, if you're parenting a teen with a high level reactive attachment, is how do you do this? I wish there were a manual. I wish there were even a book written. I wish I'd written the book, except I can't, because there is no good book written on this, because you have to be walking side by side your children through this hot time in their brains and helping them feel loved and cared about and not over controlled or over corrected, which is the trick, right? I'll come back to this in a minute, but I wanted to start there because a lot of times parents who come to trainings about how to parent children who have this have very high level behaviors. And a lot of times we want to start there. And I don't want to start there because that's sort of the end of the road. And I want to start at the beginning of the road to help those of you who might have younger children to help in a way prevent some of the brain on fire period with interventions that start early enough. I have shepherded children into adulthood with other parents for all these years. And what I have come to know is that it's never too late. They are not hopeless. And they do require a lot more energy than you ever imagined you had or that you could contribute. But it's worth it because when they do get to the other side and their prefrontal cortex begins to develop, then their maturity kicks in and all the things you taught them over all these years that it seemed like they weren't learning from does kick in, and you'll be surprised by who they become. Will they be perfect? No. Who's perfect? Will they still struggle often with things like relationships and jobs and housing? Yep. Will they be more reasonable people? Usually, yes. So there are some situations where they end up getting involved in drugs and alcohol, which of course makes them go in a direction that's less, yeah, they're okay, but that's a different add-on, right? So that's a different add-on. If they get sucked away into some addictive process, that's actually really difficult for their brains to recover from. But I'm talking about those who do not get swept away in that and who just move into maturity in their late 20s, by the way. That's when maturity kicks in with kids who have attachment challenge. It's not when they're 18 and it's not when they're 25. It's actually usually somewhere more like 27. So hold on. It doesn't mean they have to live with you until they're 27, but it does mean that you probably will be parenting them significantly through that age for sure and beyond. So my whole agenda for today is to teach you about the house model of parenting. And this comes out of Dan Hughes's model of dyadic developmental psychotherapy. For me, as a person who teaches therapeutic parenting to parents all over the country, this model holds the water for reactive attachment disorder the best. And if you can follow this model and you can understand brain first interventions, this will help your children heal. They can heal, but it takes a long time and you can't give up the process. If you give up in the middle of the process and you return from therapeutic parenting to traditional parenting, you will lose ground and it will impede their healing. So I say that to you to help you think in terms of something like if you go on a diet, you usually lose a few pounds and then you gain it all back plus a couple. But if you make a lifestyle change and you actually change how you see food and how you eat and how you live your life, you can lose those pounds and keep them off the rest of your life. This is like that. If you learn therapeutic parenting and you make that lifestyle change and you make a commitment to it, to the house model of parenting, therapeutic parenting with brain first as the model, the lifestyle itself will do the healing for you over time. But it's not an intervention. It's not a trick and it's not a tool in your toolbox. I almost hate that concept of tool in the toolbox because you can't cookie cutter somebody. You have to be in a relationship with them. There's no such thing as a tool. There's just you working with another person in a relationship. So this is a relationship first model, brain first model, and a behavior, a shame-based, traditional parenting aside model. We just really have to push that aside because it doesn't work here, at least not until the child has a very strong sense of felt safety and a good sense of trust in you. And that takes years and years to develop, even if you got your child in the hospital. Now, some people think that that's insane, but if you have a child that you got in the hospital and they have signs of attachment challenge, it's the same process, even if they didn't have a lot of extra trauma on top, because that is enough. If you lose your parent in the hospital at birth, that is trauma enough to change your brain process. So this is the house model of parenting. It looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, but let me just say, if you start at the bottom, the very bottom here says secure base. And then the orange in the middle says building relationships, and the orange at the top says supporting behavior. This is written by, I'm trying to remember her first name. Her last name is Golding. She works with Dan Hughes. I want you to think of this house parenting paradigm as starting foundationally with the secure base, and that you can't move to the top without first moving yourself up each rung in this house. It's really important, and it takes years before you ever get to the middle rung where it says building relationships. So the very first part of secure base lasts a really long time. And I'm going to go through what those things are with you so that you have a sense of what I'm talking about. We bandy these words around a lot: secure base, attachment, attunement, regulation, dysregulation, dysmaturity. We bandy these words around, and sometimes we know what they mean and sometimes we don't. So I'm going to try and throw some meaning on each of these words, and all the different models don't mean the same thing when you say the same words. So that's the challenge, I think. So if we use the house as the model, then we think in terms of a secure base being foundational. All the things that you're going to build with this child are on top of a secure base. In order to do secure base parenting with a child who has attachment relationship injury, you have to understand what a secure base means. And so it means that you are safe. You're a safe parent. Not that you just don't harm your children, like by hitting them, but that you are emotionally safe. It actually means more about emotional safety than it does about anything else, although, of course, the rest follows. But it's our emotional unsafety that causes the mistrust and the breach in our relationships with children from difficult beginnings, because they come to us having already received a relational injury. So when you think about attachment challenge, I want you to think relationship injury. And the reason I'm saying that is that when you lose your parent in any part of the first 2 years of life, you have a massive primal wound to your ability to form relationships with other people, because your primary relationship is with your biological parent. And if that relationship gets lost, severed, or you're abandoned from it, you're separated from it, you experience internally a profound sense of loss, a profound sense of lack of foundation. Your secure base is fundamentally destroyed for the rest of your life from that disruption. I can't really say that with more emphasis, really. It is so meaningful, and a lot of us really dismiss it, right? We think, oh, well, it was just a few months, or it was just a year you were with that person. You've been with me for 10 years, and my relationship surely should be more important than that very first foundational relationship that was just a few minutes in the blink of time. But no, there was 9 months in utero, first of all, and then there was the desire to meet back up with that person at birth or after birth. There is a fundamental hardwired desire to reconnect with the birth parent after birth. Every fiber of the being of a baby says, where is my mommy, right? It's not a thought, it's an experience of trying to seek that comfort. Because when you come out of the womb, you come out into the air, and you come out alone, and you come out frightened. And it's a very extreme experience to be born. And in the moments following birth, all you want is to be reunited with the heartbeat, with the sound, with the smell, with the experience of that person you spent 9 months with in utero. And so if that doesn't happen, then your brain and your body go into a kind of toxic stress state where you are fundamentally frightened nearly to death. Now, if someone holds you right away, then you don't die. You could die if no one held you right away, actually. You could just have a failure to thrive, and within a very short period of time, you might just die. Even if someone were feeding you, but they didn't touch you, you may actually just failure to thrive die, because that connection is so fundamentally important. But let's say you come out of the womb and into the arms of, say, a nurse, or you come into the arms of your new foster adopt parent or your new adoption family. That's still the wrong arms. It's the wrong heartbeat. It's the wrong cadence of sound, and the smell and the foods and everything is different. And so even though it will be somewhat soothing in terms of I'm not going to die, there's still going to be a dysregulation in the brain-body processes right there that say that you're not the right person. Where's my person? And so there's a kind of seeking that happens. Where is she? Where is home? Because you're symbiotic when you come out of the womb with a biological parent, and that severing really makes you feel like you have lost something fundamental to who you are. This goes on to repair in various ways, but it generally doesn't repair in a solid, secure base kind of way. It repairs in a, okay, I guess you're it now. I guess I'm going to survive because you're feeding me. these aren't thoughts, these are experiences on a body level. I guess I'm going to be okay, but I don't know I'm going to be okay. And so I'm on high alert, high alert, high alert. That high alert is actually cortisol pumping up into the prefrontal cortex of that baby. It stays pumped up like that, ongoing, especially if other trauma occurs. Let's say you go into emergency foster care right after birth. So you lose your biological parent, and then you go into emergency foster care and you find somebody and you're like, okay, you're the new person. The baby tries to attach to that person. But let's say this is just a 48-hour stint here, and then you're going to go into another foster care system. So now the baby's attachment with that person gets broken. They get moved to another temporary foster care that's maybe only 24 days, maybe 30 days. And so they go there and they try to attach again. And eventually seeking attachment stops. And they're just like, I'm not going to try to do this anymore because it hurts. It hurts emotionally to lose it. So I'm not going to even try. Now, these are not, again, not thoughts. These are imprints that happen on the brain. So then let's say you move into a foster adopt home, and this is going to be your permanent home. And let's say it's at 3 months, but you had a breach of attachment 2 or 3 times between being born and getting to your now hopefully permanent home. You may have already decided on a mind-body level. It's not a decision. Again, it's just a biological imperative. It happens that this world is not safe. I do not belong. I don't know who this is. I hope they keep feeding me. I'm scared of them. I'm scared a lot. I have toxic stress now, and my wiring is getting wired around up regulation or collapsed regulation. It could be one or the other. And then there forward, whatever happens with this person, let's say you get to keep this attachment. Whatever happens here now becomes either a healing agent for you or becomes a further stressor for you as you move forward in your development as a baby. And that's what I am advocating for, is that everybody who is in the situation to be a healing agent for a child who has had this kind of breach in their lives is that we understand fundamentally what's happening on the mind-body level of this child, regardless of how old they are when they come to you. This has happened to them, and it is sealed in their neural networks and in their sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, that some are automatic and some are not, but they're hardwired there, so that they are hardwired now for high alert, hypervigilance, lacking trust, and self-doubt, right? Like, I'm not wanted, probably. Somebody didn't want me because I've been left, I've been lost, I've been forgotten. I might even be unlovable. So all of that is not a thought. Again, it's hardwiring on a system level. And so then the child moves forward in life, even though they might be with perfectly loving adoptive family that loves this baby as well as they can. If this family does not understand what might have just been happening to this baby or to this child, then they're going to go forward and think that they can treat this child like neurotypical children who don't have complex developmental trauma, because that's how we're all trained, right? We're all pretty much think that everybody gets raised the same way, and that children respond the same to the same kinds of interventions. But what's true is that that won't happen. In most cases, it won't happen. Now, some kids are more compliant because of their nature and their temperament, and so they don't have the same kind of obvious reactions to the parenting. But I promise you, by the time they get to the teen years, they will. And so once their brains get on fire in the teen years and they gather some agency, you're going to see a lot of that show up there, and you'll be like, what's happening? I thought we were all attached and all good, and now we're not. Why is that happening? It's because it was always there, just somewhat underground, until there was more agency in the child and until the brain gets a little bit heated, because it really does always in adolescence. So secure base, fundamental. And what a secure base is: felt safety, a child having felt safety in their home. In order for children to have felt safety in this model, you would acquire an attitude of PACE. And PACE is simply playful, accepting, curious, and empathic. If you adopt that model where you meet your children in a playful, accepting, curious, and empathic way, no matter what they're doing something that you don't like, if they're doing something you do like, if they're doing something you're scared, that makes you scared, it doesn't matter. You meet them in a place that's fundamentally about felt safety so that they don't become afraid of you. PACE is a model that helps parents set the stage for felt safety in their mind. So it's mind-mindedness. They call it mind-mindedness, where you're paying attention to the mind of your child when you're parenting them so that you're always creating this secure base with them. So safety is not whether or not they're safe. It's whether they feel safe. How children feel safe is by having safe parents. And safe parents are parents who have soft eyes, soft tones, loving words. They are friendly and kind and empathic and curious rather than accusing and correcting and critical and threatening, right? So PACE is a whole model for how to be a parent in a loving way to create felt safety. And so even when you're mad, you can do that in a PACE way, like mad because maybe this is the 15th time you asked your child not to go play over in the playground with this other family, and they're still doing it. That might make you angry as a parent because you're tired of having to say this over and over. But a paceful parent would go with playfulness and say, hey, come with me. Let's go play over here. And then you might say, remember, ask permission, right? You might have to say that, 400 times is what we would say, because that's how many times it takes to create one new neural pathway. You might have to repeat yourself a lot in order to bring a child somewhere else. Now, you may be inclined to say, no, it's not okay. You can't go over here. With a child who comes from difficult beginnings, what you're saying to them is, you should be scared to come over here with your tone. Your tone is sending a threat message to their threat system. Your tone, how you speak to your child. Now, when I was raising my kids, I thought your kids were supposed to be afraid of you. I know that sounds crazy, but because I was afraid of my parents, and that's what kind of kept me on the straight and narrow, I didn't want to get into trouble. So I thought it was because I was afraid of my mom that I was good, that I did good things. And that probably was true, but also I got all kinds of other messages from that. I was scared of my mom. I didn't trust her. I wouldn't go to her to ask for help with anything or to share anything personal with her because she scared me. And so if you come from difficult beginnings, which I do, then you're wired differently. And when your parent uses traditional parenting tones, which are, you should be afraid of me, the hairy eyeball, right? That look, it's like I'm going to slice you up and eat you on toast. If you do that one more time, that hairy eyeball, that is a scary eyeball. And you don't want to be scaring your children into submission. And I'll tell you why. Because you're feeding their fear that they already live in, the toxic stress that will cause them to be more and more dismature over time. So instead of them learning what you're telling them and behaving, they don't learn what you're telling them because they go offline. They're flooded with cortisol. That makes their prefrontal cortex go offline. They don't learn what you're trying to tell them. What they do learn is that you're scary and that you think they're bad. That's exactly how they take it in. You're scary. You don't like me, and you think I'm bad. And then they take that with them forward because they have a very fragile ego state. And we need to understand that so we aren't constantly threatening our kids with our words and our sounds and our facial expressions and our punishments. That does not actually teach them anything we mean to be teaching. It does teach them a ton of things we don't mean to be teaching, like, you can't trust me. And you were right to never trust parents. And, you need to sneak around me because if you actually told me outright, I might have to yell at you some more and scare you some more. Just keep this in mind because we're going to keep going forward and you'll be at a place where you're like, well, how do I get a kid to behave? Well, isn't that a curious question? And we'll come back to that in a second. But if you persist with PACE long enough, your children will behave. And the reason they'll behave is not because they're afraid of you. They will behave because they love you and they're connected with you and they care what you think. All children care what their parents think, but our kids who come from difficult beginnings, they don't care as much what you think in terms of, do you like them or not like them? They care, are you going to hurt them or not hurt them? That's what they're caring about. And that's hardwired. They aren't thinking about that. It's just a hardwired message from having been harmed in the relational arena. So Dan Hughes says that traumatized children can experience blocked trust. He says all of them experience blocked trust. And what can happen if you live with a child who experiences blocked trust, meaning I don't trust caregivers, right? I don't trust adults. I don't trust people who are supposedly parenting me. They come with that because their trust has been breached or broken when they lost their biological parent or when their biological parent harmed them. And so they come with blocked trust. And then if you are parenting a child with blocked trust long enough, you may end up with blocked care, meaning it's hard for you to love them back, right? So they don't trust you. And after a while, you stop caring about them because it's like that reciprocal piece that you get back and forth between children and parents that fuels you, makes you feel loved and cared for too, goes missing. And then you can be like, why am I bothering with you? You don't care about me either. That's a problem, right? Because once you get blocked care, then you're in danger of no longer sending the unconditional love message, but rather a conditional love message. If you behave the way I want you to, then I'll love you. And that's the end of that relationship for sure. Dan Hughes also says that our children who have this blocked trust, they have fear of connecting within reciprocal relationships. That would be a parent-child relationship. As they grow up and they start wanting to date people, they're going to have trouble there. And when they grow up further into adult life, they're going to have trouble in their romantic relationships and often also in work relationships, because all of those are reciprocal relationships. They're back and forth, they're intersubjective. And that's where I give to you, you give to me, and we go back and forth like this in a fairly regular interval. And that creates trust between us. But if I just want to take from you and have you help me survive because I'm afraid of you and I just need to survive you, that's a one-way relationship. And one-way relationships are often very concerning to everybody, but they often lead to emotional or physical violence. And that's what's important for us to see, that a lot of our kids end up being violent toward us, the parent. And that's because we don't realize that they're afraid of reciprocal relationships. They've been stuck in a one-way relationship. And if we've been in that on the other side, we're going to get angry with our children if we don't fully understand it. And then we will act out. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. Kids who are traumatized often have high levels of shame, and the shame is very closely attached to vulnerability. So the child stiffens up, they block out other people, and when they're vulnerable, like when they feel needy or they feel like they need some love or they are trying to get attention or whatever it is, attention is a need that children have, but they need it so much that sometimes parents will be like, oh, enough already, okay? I've given you enough attention for today, and that triggers a shame spiral for them, which can make them go back into blocked trust. Like, nope, okay, I can't ask you for anything. I can't need you because you're going to tell me I'm too much. And then I'll feel shamed. And I already feel ashamed that somebody didn't want me in the first place. I'm saying these like thoughts, but they're not thoughts. Again, they're mind-body experiences. They really have nothing to do with thoughts until we get older and we start putting thoughts on our feelings. That's what happens, right? We feel things, and then over time we start trying to explain what we feel to ourselves. I feel this way because I was abandoned. I feel this way because you're mean to me. I feel this way because no one's ever loved me. Kids will say all these things, and that's the story they tell themselves about the feelings that they've had really all their lives, likely. And then lastly, and I think this is one of the bigger problems, is that our kids miscue attachment needs through negative patterns of behavior. And what I mean by that is they come at you angry. They come at you in all kinds of negative ways to get their needs met. And that's miscuing attachment needs, right? It's like, I need you, so I'm going to hit you. I need you, so I'm going to tell you I hate you. I need you, so I'm going to run away. They have needs. They need the person to override their fears. But a lot of times their behavior is so extreme and so big and so negative, and we don't know what we're looking at as parents, that we're like, yeah, you're right. I don't love you. Nobody can love somebody who acts like that. And parents do say those things often to kids who have attachment challenge because they're miscuing their attachment needs and they're pushing the one person in the room who might love them away out of fear and lack of trust. Let me say this. This stuff is actually really quite hard to understand when you're living with it because it feels counterintuitive. Also, your parenting will feel counterintuitive, and all the things that come to mind to do will often not be appropriate for what we would call contraindicated, right? We should not do that with our children, like setting clear expectations. Like if you say, if you call me a bitch one more time, that's it. That's interesting language, and almost everybody's probably felt that way if they have a kid that called them a bitch more than once. But the fact of the matter is that kid might call you it again, and then what? Like what are you telling them when you say that's it? Like what? You're not going to love them anymore. They're grounded for the rest of their lives. What? And so we have to be careful about how we react to kids who are reactive with us, because we're misunderstanding their miscued attachment needs when we're doing that. Don't worry about consequences. First of all, they know consequences backward and forward. They know exactly what they're supposed to do and not supposed to do very early on. They're hypervigilant, remember, so they've been paying very close attention to what you like and what you don't like. They know right from wrong. They can't do it. They can't apply what they know in the moment of wanting to do it, right? If they have a need, a desire, an impulse, they can't apply the thing they know, which is right and wrong. that is in the prefrontal cortex that's offline, not developed yet. It's developed when they're not under stress, but in the moment of stress, which means the moment of any kind of decision they need to make about doing the right thing or the wrong thing, they can't access it. And so you don't really have to worry about teaching consequences. Life is going to dish up some consequences. And what's really true about kids like this is they cannot learn from being told by you, parents. They cannot learn that way. And this is because of their wiring, that they are in charge of themselves and that they don't trust parents. So in their minds, they're not really being parented. They're parenting themselves. And so they have to learn from their own mistakes. And they don't learn easily from their own mistakes. They kind of have to bump into the same door over and over to figure out that there's a door there. And we have to let them. And that's really hard. But that's the whole point really of parenting them, is that we give them a safe place to live where they are unconditionally regarded and loved. And we allow them to learn from their own mistakes, and where they don't have to fall on their face outside the comfort or the safety of our arms. So if they're in a foster care system because we pitch them back, they're going to fall down because they're trying to learn from their mistakes, but there's no one there to help make it softer or to help them not hit the ground so hard. They don't need to hit the ground super hard. They don't need to crash and burn, but they do need to bump hard into the wall. And that's just part of it. It's part of learning. It's hard for parents to believe that they know right from wrong when they choose wrong so frequently, but all you have to do is ask them. Just ask them, what was the right thing to do? And they will tell you every single time. I don't care how old they are, usually past 3 years old. They can tell you exactly what they should have done, but didn't. And it's because they can't actually apply it in that moment. I really want you to hear the word can't, because when you're offline, when you're emotionally offline and you're flooded with cortisol, you can't access thinking, good thinking skills, good judgment. You can't access your executive function at all. You're just on impulse. You're just on survival. You're just on getting what you need right now. And you're not thinking about the bear. And the bear is you, by the way. All parents are the bear in this situation, because you are the person with all the power. A lot of times I talk to parents who have kids who are not quite teens yet, maybe, and they'll say, I'm such a victim. I have no power here. And I'm like, are you kidding? You're the only person with the power here. Your kids think you have all the power and that they don't have any, but it gets reversed when you're in the position of the parent, because you don't feel like you have power, but you do. And kids think you have all of it. And that's the mismatch, right? Where you're out of sync with each other completely. And if you can understand that you are the person holding a lot of the power, wow, you could be the greatest gift your kids ever got, right? Is to just be like, hey, it's okay. You can ask me to do this. We can go do that. Why not make their lives delicious and wonderful? If we weren't so busy trying to teach them right and from wrong, we would be playing with them more and enjoying them more, because they do already know right from wrong. They just can't access it in the moment. If you could understand that, you could stop teaching and start playing and being in a relationship with them instead of being the corrector in chief of your family all the time. And I'm not saying this with judgment, by the way. I am you. I had to learn this the hard way. I was all these things until I did a lot of research. This is a long time ago now, but I did a lot of research to find all of this out and to see what the studies said, to get all the training so that I could be a better parent. I had no idea what I was dealing with or how to handle it, even though I was a therapist for 15 years before my kids came home to me from the foster care system. I just had only traditional parenting strategies. I had no idea how to do it differently. But there is a better way. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you will catch part 4, the last in this series, in our next episode. Until then, believe in your children, because the world doesn't always know how. And your love matters most, even when your children can't tell you so. So remember, your love matters when more than love is required. I'll see you next week.